that. Now, you get the expected, 21-year age gaps, the Leo DiCaprio types. Yeah, no, obviously that's too much. But the Gen Z women who have been taught by the millennials that any form of power imbalance is bad can't really get past this. And I think there's also something to do with the nature of basically men and women, right? As in, women are more interested in looking for men who are more experienced because they have higher status, they have more resources, and they project a more worldly demeanor to compared to young men who don't do this. And I'm sure that everyone remembers when they were in school and, like, you know, when they were 14 and their 14-year-old classmates who are women, who are girls, were dating like 16 to 18-year-olds, right? And everyone's like, oh, they shouldn't be doing that. And they wanted to anyway because these guys were more worldly, they had more experience, they had more resources, they had access to cars, blah, blah, blah. And it's just something that, honestly, as a teenage boy, you just have to kind of suck up. You just have to go, right, okay, all right, well, there's nothing I can do about that. I just have to wait for time to pass. But the point being that this is something that is natural outside of this sort of setting. So, for example, if I became single tomorrow, I'd probably date a woman in her mid-30s, and I'm 45, right? So, and I think a lot of it is down to the fact that this is just a kind of natural evolutionary thing for women, and that they want to look up to their men. They want men who are admirable, whom they consider in some way, frankly, superior to themselves in experience, in resources, in wit, in knowledge. Women tend to, this is what hypergamy is, women want to date upwards and want men who are better than themselves at doing things. And so the feminist attempt to level the genders and destroy men's ability to amass this kind of authority and gravitas in themselves has been totally destructive for women's relationships, women's romantic lives. Like, actually, and Jordan Peterson makes this point, what kind of partner do you want? It's like, well, the feminists have said we want everything to be the same. People have got to be born on exactly the same day and earn exactly the same amount of money. But women actually don't self-select for that. The revealed preference of women is actually they want men who they perceive to be superior to themselves in intelligence, earning power, height, physical strength, all of these other just things. Women want men who they can look up to. And that's totally reasonable and totally natural. But that also means, well, if we're in a society where men are deliberately immiserated, held back on purpose, by design, as a point of policy, to even the balance between the genders, well, everyone's love life gets totally thrown out of whack. Right? Men now can't really impress women, and so women don't really look up to them, and that means that women are constantly alone and just end up on, you know, Tinder or Bumble or whatever, just essentially being very, very cheap prostitutes. And the men, and they don't get to form the relationship they're looking for. And men just either, like it's the 80-20 rule that we've heard so much about, the most attractive guys just go through women like toilet paper, and the other 80% of men just don't get women at all. Because for the average guy, it's probably not his looks that are winning over most of the women around him that he gets to date. It's going to be his charm, his status, his worldly wisdom, his place in society, frankly, is what's going to be attracting a lot of women to him. Because in other ways, he's just average. And so giving the average man something that helps women find in him something attractive is actually really, really, really good for society as a whole. It's not good for feminism. And so you can see why a sort of centrist position would be, yeah, no, men should be the primary breadwinners, because then women will look up to them, women will rely on them, women will want something from them, and it is in this that women find their attraction to their men, assuming they're not just built Adonises, which, I mean, you know, most of us just aren't, frankly. And so this is important for making healthy relationships. And men skewing towards being conservative represent that. The women skewing very liberal represents decades of feminist propaganda that is designed to equalise things. But even then, in their own stated preferences, they're like, no, we still want the superior men. Because we can get men who, like, we want the old men who are frankly, in agreement with us with our politics. And so the question for Gen Zers is, okay, well, what do I do, right? And well, the answer is actually not everyone is a radical leftist. Like, it is like a larger swing that way, but it's about the political content that you imbibe when you're young growing up, right? And so this is a fascinating post I just saw going around on Twitter. Just some guy who's just like, well, here's something that happened to me. I knew something was up with Gen Z when an 18-year-old waitress at a diner I frequent told me women shouldn't vote. I want to be a stay-at-home mum. She was a totally normal girl, not online, just a typical hydro-flask public schooler, unchurched. Signs were there. So, sure, like the older Gen Zs and younger millennial women are, of course, deeply indoctrinated into feminism, but the Andrew Tate stuff and the memes that come out of it, the way that people view the world, it's not just confined to young men. And I guess we can see from this that a lot of young women kind of agree, actually. And women tend to go a lot more conservative when they get married and have children, which, if a woman is naturally inclined to want to get married and have children, well, she's going to actually be quite conservative and end up with some quite hardline opinions, actually. I mean, women shouldn't vote is not an opinion I've ever voiced. And so it's you can see what I mean, like, and I consider myself pretty damn right wing these days. So it's interesting how there is this distinction and how people are beginning to not wake up to it. And so basically, if you're a sort of Gen Z guy, you're like 24, 25, you're probably going to have to wait a few years. But in like 4 or 5 years' time, the sort of, 20, 22-year-old women, well, they might well themselves be fairly right-wing and themselves looking for people with whom politically they agree. And you might be in that position. So who knows, maybe there's hope on the horizon. But I think it's interesting how the natural sort of nature's age difference between men and women, and I swear to God, I've seen this so many times, the most compatible couples seem to have like a good, 5 to 10 years between them. The younger women prefer the older men, the older man prefers the younger woman, and it just seems to, everything seems to just work naturally from this basis. This kind of extreme parity seems to be fairly unnatural, the product of feminism and the product of a political ideology that, frankly, as time might be coming to an end. So again, who knows? This all might fix itself. I don't know. But I think this is a very interesting development that does speak directly to the political bifurcation of the men and women in Gen Z. And I don't know what the solution is, frankly. I mean, let's hope that actually people choosing to consume right-wing content rather than being force-fed left-wing content just makes Gen Z and then Gen Alpha, who comes after them, well, a lot more right-wing than the bloody millennials and the older and the Gen Z women. And maybe it could be, fingers crossed, who knows, if we influencers on the internet keep doing our job well enough, that we eventually just, these guys turn out to be a bizarre aberration. Because, the boomers are a sort of intrinsically feminist cohort, but they still lived relatively traditional lives in many respects, because they grew up with their parents being very traditional. The Gen Xers seem to be happy to be traditional, as far as I can tell, although probably tend not to actually live traditional lives, whereas the millennials live completely feminist lives. And so maybe this becomes a weird aberration where, like, oh yeah, the millennials, insane intransigent feminists. But if we, the influencers, keep doing our job and you guys keep watching and we are promoting worldviews that actually make more sense to you on a natural level, that would actually make you happy, right? Rather than trying to artificially take you out of what it is that nature had intended for you, and we get back into a more wholesome world where people can live the lives that actually is best for them, then maybe the millennials get to be a weird aberration and your futures get to be better than their futures are going to be.
So the future's here, and it sucks.
Future's now, old man.
We are promised flying cars, robotic assistants, and a cure for cancer. Instead, we got AI-generated girls with Down syndrome being used to promote spicy content.
It's over. We are screwed.
You might think I'm joking. When this article dropped, I wish I was hallucinating. People are using AI tools to create fake influencers who are made to look like they have Down syndrome because that's the new hotness. Normal women? Nah, that's old stuff. Give me a girl that can't count. And they're using these horrible AI tools to sell content. These brave entrepreneurs are calling it only downs. Imagine what Henry Ford could have done if he had the power of AI and absolutely no moral compass. I'm 100% sure no one will realize that's a joke. And I will get a comment like,
Henry Ford used to be a really big supporter of Hitler.
like I don't know American history. It's called comedy, you little beatnik.
These influencers frequently promote their AI-modified appearances with explicit reference to content, with some even using terms like only downs to push their message.
Where is your guard? Where is your guard now?
Only down. Society isn't just declining, it's speed running into a collapse. I'm here to tell you that we're done. Shut it down, it's over. Humanity had a good run, but it's time to pack it in. Much like Apple trying to escape China.
You know what really kills me? This works. These people are racking up followers, engagement, and actual money selling AI-generated disability thirst traps. Because the content economy is so broken that this is rewarded now. Welcome to hell. No talent, no skill. Just weird, grotesque engagement bait wrapped up in fake disability with a link in the bio. This isn't activism, it's just horny and weird. Now let's read this description here. I'm gonna ruin your day.
Hey there, welcome to my channel. I'm all about having fun, sharing my world, and spreading good vibes. Life is colorful, full of laughter, and way too short to be anything but yourself. Come hang out. Let's make some awesome memories together. Don't forget to subscribe. It's gonna be a blast.
I just want to show that everyone can be beautiful. I hate this job. Like they created a heartfelt tribute to Down syndrome community, not a new generator with extra chromosomes and a sob story. These AI accounts literally say crap like, I just want to feel loved.
You know, I have a lot of ex-girlfriends that would say that in between their relationships, they would text me that sort of stuff, completely ignoring the fact that they were ruining my life. Sorry, I was having existential crisis.
Right next to the unlock exclusive pics, we're living in the bad ending. This is the timeline where we deserve to lose. This is what late stage capitalism looks like. Horny people simping for AI disabilities and paying for it.
Stop him!
Pages like Maria Perry were live for weeks on Instagram, raking up to over 100,000 followers before Instagram finally stopped it. However, you can still find content on places like YouTube.
Why are we calling this content? I'm so sick of that word being used as a blanket statement for whatever digital litter people put out there.
What are we doing? I remember when the internet used to be fun. Dumb, yes, but not whatever the hell this is. Now you can't scroll for 10 seconds without someone cosplaying as a genetic disorder for likes. We thought AI was going to take our jobs. It turns out it was taking our dignity. This is peak degeneracy. I don't even care anymore. If the robots revolt, I'm siding with them. Skynet was right. Just a reminder, we were promised flying cars. We were promised clean energy, jetpacks, robots. Does anybody remember the Jetsons? Instead, we got AI Down syndrome thirst traps. We are officially in the bad ending, the darkest timeline, the age of apathy. So yeah, if you're wondering how cooked the human race is, just know there's a whole niche market out there for people doing it to AI-generated disabilities.
Much like Virgil leading Dante, I plan on guiding you into the deepest parts of hell, from which there is no return.
And if that doesn't make you want to walk into the ocean and never come back, you're part of the problem, you bigot. We're coming for you, globalists. For the rest of us, We're stuck watching the clown car crash and burst into flames in real time. Bozo is squealing in horror as his nose burns off, but it's all part of the show. See you in hell, kids!
Around the house for a very long time. Like, we were able to finally clean out our garage. We were able to redo several different things.
What do you mean? You were able to clean out your garage because you were given money. Could anybody have cleaned, like...
Metroid Prime was an unexpected masterpiece when it dropped in November of 2002. Before its release, most Metroid fans didn't think this game would be very good. While Nintendo desperately tried to market it as a first-person adventure, it came off as more of a generic shooting game desperately trying to ride on the coattails of that genre's success. It didn't help that it was being developed by an untested subsidiary team based in Austin, Texas, that had no hand in the development of the previous games in the series, and frankly seemed to have no clue what they were doing. But to everyone's surprise, Retro Studios managed to pull off an incredible game that gracefully combined the game design of Super Metroid with the best graphics, gameplay, and soundtrack the GameCube could offer. It was immediately clear that they put a serious amount of muscle into this game, and it paid off. Had Metroid Prime flopped, the series probably would have disappeared for another decade, but now there was no doubt that players would want a sequel. This left Retro Studios with the unenviable task of deciding exactly how to make a sequel to a game like Metroid Prime. The first game had a troubled development to say the least, but at least they went into it with a clear goal: make Super Metroid again, but in 3D. Having achieved this, what direction would they go next? A great sequel needs to maintain all the qualities that made the first game successful while innovating enough to stand apart from it and push the concept further. There are so many ways they can go wrong if not handled carefully, not to mention you have to meet the sky-high expectations of gamers all over the world. Their original plan of attack was to make the new game all take place on a creepy AI-controlled spaceship with a heavy focus on both co-op and competitive multiplayer game modes. But perhaps fearing that this was a step too far that would anger the Metroid fanbase, they scrapped this concept and moved the game to a planet, which they called Aether. To make the game distinct from the first, they decided to make this planet split between a light and dark dimension, kind of like A Link to the Past. With that settled, they got to work. When the game finally came out under the title Metroid Prime Echoes, the results were
disappointing.
The game got great reviews, but not as great as the first. It sold pretty well, but not half as much as the first. Also, the hype around its release, despite the fact that Metroid Prime had been a complete knockout punch, was weirdly low. I don't remember people freaking out about the upcoming release of Echoes like they did with, say, Halo 2 or Twilight Princess. But I do remember getting the game, playing it for a while, then putting it away. And I certainly wasn't the only one who treated it that way. The prevailing opinion of both fans and critics at the time was that it was pretty good, but not as good as Metroid Prime. Recently, though, that view seems to be changing. There's been some rumbling on the internet about how Echoes was actually a near-perfect sequel that was misunderstood at its time. I've even seen some pretty reasonable arguments suggesting that it's actually better than the first game. It's great to see people warming up to this game years later, but better than the first game? That seemed like a pretty bold claim to me. I was curious where I would stand on this topic, and there was only one way to find out. So here's what I did. I beat the first game, then Echoes, and just for good measure, I mopped up corruption as well. You know, pretty standard, pretty basic stuff. Day in the life for a guy like me. With my scientific fieldwork complete, I concluded that while I really enjoyed Echoes more than ever and thought it was a great game, it still has a lot of major shortcomings that hold it back from being a great sequel. It made improvements in some places, but it also made major mistakes in others, and it blatantly failed to fix a few of Prime 1's biggest issues. In this video, I'm going to explain why I believe Echoes is not an ideal sequel and Prime 1 is still the better game. But before getting into that, it's worth exploring a few things the game did do to improve upon its predecessor. First of all, Echoes takes a better approach to difficulty than the first game. What's funny is, many critics at the time complained that this game was too hard, but in hindsight, it's plain to see that the difficulty curve was actually a huge improvement. Metroid Prime was extremely easy almost all the way through. Even the big freaky bosses who took ages to kill were unlikely to actually kill you before you finished them off. In fact, it's quite easy to play through all of Metroid Prime without dying once. That is, until you get to Phazon fucking Mines. Here, they decided to crank up the difficulty with no warning. You can save your progress once at the start, and then you go through this long gauntlet of labs and hallways without a save station in sight, being put up against the first enemies in the game with the firepower to actually kill you. It all ends in this room, where the door to the next save station is locked, and then you're ambushed by this little jackass. When you shoot it, nothing happens. It's unclear how to fight it, and there's no way to scan it to gather information because it's cloaked. Unlike all the bosses you fought so far, which are big and slow, this thing is small and fast. You can get killed by this thing without even having a chance of knowing how to damage it. Hell, I still don't know how to damage this little motherfucker. And in a game where you've never been challenged like this before, the sudden need to think on your feet and improvise catches you entirely off guard. It's easy to die in this room. And assuming you've been scanning all the computers in the mines, death here means you may have to replay a good 40 minutes of the game, not even knowing if this little shitbird will just kill you again at the end of it. Then the Omega Pirate is even harder, but this makes Ridley and the final boss feel way too easy. All in all, the game jumps around way too much with its difficulty. Prime 2 is much more consistent in this regard. Right at the start, the first bosses are pretty tough, and you may actually die to them. They're not unfair though, and you'll beat them by persevering. By challenging the player early this time, Retro teaches players to approach combat with caution, so you're never blindsided. This takes a better approach to difficulty than the first game. What's funny is, many critics at the time complained that this game was too hard, but in hindsight, it's plain to see that the difficulty curve was actually a huge improvement. Metroid Prime was extremely easy almost all the way through. Even the big freaky bosses who took ages to kill were unlikely to actually kill you before you finished them off. In fact, it's quite easy to play through all of Metroid Prime without dying once. That is, until you get to Phazon fucking Mines. Here, they decided to crank up the difficulty with no warning. You can save your progress once at the start, and then you go through this long gauntlet of labs and hallways without a save station in sight, being put up against the first enemies in the game with the firepower to actually kill you. It all ends in this room, where the door to the next save station is locked, and then you're ambushed by this little jackass. When you shoot it, nothing happens. It's unclear how to fight it, and there's no way to scan it to gather information because it's cloaked. Unlike all the bosses you fought so far, which are big and slow, this thing is small and fast. You can get killed by this thing without even having a chance of knowing how to damage it. Hell, I still don't know how to damage this little motherfucker. And in a game where you've never been challenged like this before, the sudden need to think on your feet and improvise catches you entirely off guard. It's easy to die in this room, and assuming you've been scanning all the computers in the mines, death here means you may have to replay a good 40 minutes of the game, not even knowing if this little shitbird will just kill you again at the end of it. Then the Omega Pirate is even harder, but this makes Ridley and the final boss feel way too easy. All in all, the game jumps around way too much with its difficulty. Prime 2 is much more consistent in this regard. Right at the start, the first bosses are pretty tough and you may actually die to them. They're not unfair though, and you'll beat them by persevering. By challenging the player early this time, Retro teaches players to approach combat with caution, so you're never blindsided by a difficulty spike. Because of this, the bosses in Echoes are generally more fun to fight than those in Metroid Prime. Prime 1 also had a pretty severe backtracking issue, where the game will lead you to one place and then force you to go all the way back the way you came. Magmoor Caverns is basically a straight line that you have to run through again and again and again to get from point A to point B, and it definitely gets repetitive fast. And don't even get me started on what happens if you go into the Frigate Orpheon without the gravity suit. Echoes mostly overcomes this whole problem by going with a radial map, where areas are arranged in a circle around a central temple, and are also directly connected to each other at the sides. Rather than running through the same hallways 1,000 times, there's usually a new way to connect to each region as you progress, which is good. I'd also add that the enemy AI is better as well, and combat is generally more intense in Echoes. Echoes also brings back the screw attack, which is awesome. And the pause menu is composed of these nodes connected by some sort of goo, and I think that's pretty cool. Oh, and this section wouldn't be complete without talking about the multiplayer mode, which was actually sick. Like, yeah, it wasn't exactly game-changing and didn't hold a candle to games like Halo, but it was still a cool addition that my friends and I had some good times with. My only complaint about this mode is that if you play it before beating the game, it would spoil the new beam weapons, but as we'll soon see, this doesn't really matter. Anyways, given all the improvements to the game's difficulty and overall design, we need to see how they stack up with common issues players had with Echoes. Only then can we determine if it's actually a good sequel. When I first played the game at launch, I remember having 3 main issues with it, and unlike critics, difficulty was never one of them. Replaying it again now, I realize that till this day I stand by all of these criticisms. They're as annoying today as they were back then, and they stop Echoes from being a great sequel. Metroid games are designed around upgrades. Many of them, such as the grapple hook, morph ball, x-ray visor, etc., are entirely situational. But an upgrade to your beam weapon really kicks things up a notch, because in addition to granting access to new areas, they also make every single shot you take more powerful. This makes them the granddaddy of upgrades, because they both open the way forward and make you stronger, changing the way the game feels to play for the better. They're always incredibly satisfying to get, and they're typically spread evenly throughout the game, so that you get a cool new one right as the honeymoon stage is ending with the one you've been using. In Super Metroid, the Spazer allows you to have more freedom of aiming, the Ice Beam allows you to freeze enemies, the Wave Beam allows you to shoot through walls, then the Plasma Beam just cranks up your damage to the max. These items are spread evenly throughout the game. Prime 1 followed this tradition of having 3 cool new beams that you unlock evenly throughout the game, and by the time you get the Plasma Beam in this one, you feel like a fucking beast. Echoes takes a totally different approach. It has 3 new beams, the Dark Beam, Light Beam, and Annihilator Beam, which sucks ass, but we'll get to that shortly. 2 of these, the Dark and Light Beam, both appear at around the 15% mark of the game, and then you don't get the Annihilator Beam until basically the very end of the game. This is a problem because there's a huge gap in the body of the game where you're not getting any new big upgrades to your main attack, and the upgrades that you do get in this section, like the Spider Ball, Boost Ball, Grapple Hook, etc., are all carried over from Prime 1. Aside from the screw attack, there's not much new to see here, and the only upgrades unique to Echoes are bookended both at the start, where they have lots of time to get stale, and at the end, where you don't have much time left to use them. But Retro actually did this for a reason, and it wasn't because they forgot how to design a Metroid game. They were going for an experimental new approach. They needed you to get both the Dark Beam and the Light Beam early, because these 2 weapons working in harmony is a core game mechanic. Once you get both of them, you're shown this message. So that's the premise here. You get both weapons early, and you get ammo for one of them by killing enemies with the other. This concept could have been interesting, but it's poorly implemented for several reasons. First of all, right off the bat, it's blatantly misleading. They forget to mention in this blurb here that in addition to enemies, destroying boxes and crates also gives you your ammo back. You might argue that players should figure this out on their own by experimenting, but that argument falls flat because what you're supposed to do in this case is extremely unintuitive. You have powerful weapons with limited ammo, so the last thing that any rational player would think to do is waste that ammo by shooting a box. Most players would switch to the power beam to destroy boxes. In doing so, they'll never get their ammo back at a steady rate, and will end up getting frustrated and turning the game off. I remember when I first got the game, I always felt like I was low on ammo, and it's probably because I never thought to shoot a box with the light beam. Because why the fuck would I? They really should have pointed out that you can shoot boxes and crates to get your ammo back, but frankly, even if they did, I don't think the system would work. Why? Well, sure, I'm not running out of ammo anymore, but there's a bigger problem here. What's the point of this if it doesn't make the game more enjoyable to play? Nobody ever complained about beams having infinite ammo in the past, so adding this limitation needed to lead to some improvement in the gameplay to be worth it. I can think of a few ways ammo might have been used to improve a game like this. For example, to add suspense built on the fear of running out, increase the challenge in an engaging way, make combat more interesting. But none of these really land. I'm never on the edge of my seat wondering how I'll get out of a tight sitch without running out of ammo, and the only reason I dread running out is because it's annoying as fuck, and the game gets less fun when I can't use my cool weapons. You know, if I run out of ammo, it's just gonna make spongy enemies take longer to kill. That's the only thing I risk here. Even without running out, this system adds nothing to the game. You're never strategically swapping between weapons in the heat of combat in some fun and engaging way to maximize your damage while conserving your resources. In fact, every fight plays out in the same way. Just use the weapon the enemy is weak against. Every single time. Light beam in the dark world, dark beam in the light world, every time. Oh, ammo's getting a little low? Okay, shoot boxes. That's as far as this thing goes. This missed opportunity to make this system interesting also applies to the bosses as well. Yes, the boss fights in this game are a major improvement over Prime 1, but since the rest of Echoes didn't do anything interesting with this ammo trading concept, this could have been the place to do something with it. For example, take a look at this flying fuck over here. You shoot it with the light beam until you run out of ammo. Now, what would have been interesting is if there were lily pads around the arena or something that you have to shoot with a dark beam to get your light beam ammo back, splitting your attention and forcing you to evaluate when it's safe to shoot the boss or when it's time to switch guns and get some more ammo. But no, here's what happens. When you run out of light beam ammo, you just keep attacking the boss as if nothing happened. Then when it releases its babies, you kill them, which you have to do because they're attacking you, and they drop more light beam ammo. As long as you're fighting the boss, the ammo just sort of replenishes itself. So what's the point? Just give me infinite ammo and let me blow this thing's brains out. There would be no difference in the fight either way. The fundamental issue here is that they threw away the satisfaction of getting new weapons steadily throughout the game in favor of this system that doesn't go anywhere at any point. The whole issue is made worse by the fact that when you finally do get the last weapon, the Annihilator Beam, at the very end of the game, it's a total fucking piece of shit. Here's the Plasma Beam. Here's the Nova Beam from Prime 3. See that? That's what a final weapon looks like. Here's the Annihilator Beam. So let's get this straight. After starving you of beam upgrades the entire game, you get this. Aside from looking like a funhouse stapled to Samus's arm, it's also completely useless. First of all, it simply doesn't deal enough damage to be satisfying. I can kill the enemies just as well with the other beams, but more importantly, a shot from this thing uses ammo from both beams. The last weapon in a Metroid game should empower you and break restrictions, not feel restrictive to use. On top of feeling disgusting to shoot as you watch all your ammo get flushed down the drain, the Annihilator Beam also breaks the entire premise of the game. The whole idea is that when you're low on ammo for one weapon, you use ammo for the other to get it back. This means the worst thing that can happen, the number one thing the player wants to avoid, is running out of ammo for both beams, because then there's no reliable way to get any ammo back. But the Annihilator Beam drains both simultaneously, and guess what? Guess what? It's a rapid fire weapon, so it just opens up the tap and drains ammo for both these guns way faster than either of them would ever drain on their own, and it doesn't dish out nearly enough damage to back that shit up. So, there you go. Obviously, I consider this ammo thing an experiment gone wrong, and I think Retro did as well since they scrapped it in Corruption, and it never returned, not even in Samus Returns, and hopefully it never will return. With the benefit of hindsight, here's how I fixed this situation. First of all, give the beams infinite ammo, okay? I don't think that requires much explanation. Give the player the dark beam first. This would make them feel like a badass in the light world, but it would be completely useless in the dark world, which would make the dark world feel more threatening and dangerous, almost like a horror game where you have to sneak past enemies instead of engaging them. Then, give the player the light beam around halfway through the game. Now they can dive deep into the Dark World and actually start killing these fucking things, changing a threatening environment to one that can be conquered. And then maybe just make the Annihilator beam a little less ugly, more damage, infinite ammo, and there you go. Instead, the result of what they pulled off here is an endgame that feels more dissatisfying than any other Metroid game I've played. You really know they messed up a Metroid game when you're fighting the final boss with a shitty weapon from the start of the game. 15 years did not change my opinion one bit. This ammo system still sucks balls. Another complaint myself and many others always held about this game is its gloomy atmosphere. Lots of grays, browns, and blacks. This actually could be used to argue that Echoes has a better atmosphere because it's more consistent with its theme, while Prime 1 jumps around, well, a lot. But that jumping around between vastly different biomes is actually one of Prime's biggest strengths. Anyone who's played Metroid Prime will tell you that landing on Talon 4 is one of the greatest moments in gaming history. It's one of those moments that resonates in your soul forever after playing it just once. This deep, glorious music swells in as the rain falls gently over the forest and trickles down your visor. You step from your ship, see a myriad of doors and crevices to explore, and you're ready to take on the planet and get lost in the game. Oh my god, get out of here, it's just insane. This is how you kick off a video game. But while the beautiful music and immersive visuals alone would be enough to make this great, what makes it really stand out is the juxtaposition from what came just before. Moments earlier, you had been exploring the eerie frigate Orpheon ship in space. It starts off creepy and weird as you find a slew of dead bodies and disturbing biological experiments. Then the tension snaps in the middle when you fight the Parasite Queen, leading to an intense escape sequence.
Evacuate immediately. Evacuate immediately.
You've hardly learned how to play the game, and you're already being forced to move full tilt through this freaky ship in 2 minutes before it explodes. You have a genuine chance of getting slammed with a game over screen if you're too slow, so you feel pressure trying to make it out alive. Therefore, when you do land on the planet, you feel like you've escaped danger and can now take matters into your own hands. It went from tight, narrow hallways to these open green canyons where you can move at your own pace and see what's to discover. Sheer relief enhances the beauty of the moment. Moments later, you'll find the lift up to Chozo Ruins, an abandoned settlement in the mountaintops above. The mystical music of the rainforest below is replaced by more of a creepy, haunting synth that later turns into a steady groove that has an almost detective-like sound. Like you're putting together the pieces of a long-dead mystery, reading the clues left behind by the ancient Chozo who lived here. In the first hour, Prime hits you with a creepy ship, a lush jungle paradise, and a ruined civilization on the arid cliffs above it. But rather than come off as weird or rushed, this bombardment of things to see and discover keeps the player engaged, and leaves them wondering what they're going to see next. Vendrana Drifts will take your breath away with its wistful, peaceful music and falling snow. The brilliance of this is that you think the area is peaceful, so you're taken off guard when you find the space pirate lab here and are dragged down to this nightmare-fueled pit of despair. This contrast in turn makes the space pirates feel like more of a threat. Echoes starts off in a dark, dusty cave, which opens into a dangerous, unforgiving wasteland. Then you get to Torvis Bog, which sure, it's the rainforest area, but it still has that dark, bleak tone. The place that stands out the most is the Sanctuary, mainly because the music that plays here can only be described as a straight banger. But it's also dark. In general, compared to Prime 1, there's an obvious lack of variety here, not to mention light and color. And when combined with the fact that so much of Echoes is spent in the Dark World, which looks almost the exact same no matter which of the 4 biomes you're in, the game feels desolate and somewhat boring compared to the first. Echoes needs that juxtaposition, those major chords, those moments of light that make you feel uplifted before plunging back into the dark and spooky haunts of the game, but they never come. Corruption would later strike back, hitting you with that staggering variety and beauty that was a hallmark of the first game. This leaves Metroid Prime 2 feeling kind of like the emo middle child of the series, and while some may like the consistency of this darkened world, I don't think it's nearly as visually or emotionally compelling as what the other 2 games in the series pulled off. In Metroid games, exploration is paramount, and variety is used to differentiate areas and keep the player curious. Even Super Metroid, with the relative limitations of the Super Nintendo, was loaded up with it. Here are 4 rooms from across that game. And here are 4 rooms in Metroid Prime. And here are the 4 literal opposite corners of the map in Echoes. So, if the game is going to rely so much on this dark, bleak theme, then the Dark World, Light World concept has to do some heavy lifting to make the game exciting. Sure, it looks samey, but is the Dark World fun to play? It's a tried and true concept seen in games like A Link to the Past, Axiom Verge 2, Guacamelee, and probably about 100 million other titles that are skipping my mind at the moment. So how was it implemented here? Well, the thing I like the most about the Dark World in Echoes is just the narrative concept behind it. The bad guys in this game, known as the Ing, just ravage this planet, forcing the native Luminoth species into hibernation. You can't help but feel bad for these little guys when you see how there's only one left awake, and his entire species is on the brink of extinction. So when you go to the Dark World, you really feel like you're taking the fight back to the Ing, coming in with guns blazing to show those little fuckducks that they can't just take whatever they want without a fight. And I like that. Aside from that, though, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the Dark World. There is, of course, the obvious reason that the Light World is already pretty dark and bland. I'm not saying the Dark World should have had more variety, because the whole point is that it's a soulless and lifeless place, but visually it's just not a welcome sight in an already dimly lit game. Maybe the solution would have been to make the Light World a bit more lush. Another complaint I have about the Dark World is the exact same thing many people don't like about Metroid Prime 1. It's crazy! One of the biggest complaints people have with Prime 1 is this backtracking issue. They point out how the run through Magmoor Caverns is just the same path over and over, and you're not exploring or seeing anything new, you're just mindlessly going through the motions to get it over with as fast as possible. Well hey, that's exactly what you do in the Dark World. Since you take damage everywhere you go, it leads to just shooting bubbles and jogging from one to the next. Most of the time I'm in here, I'm pretty keen to get out, so the entire Dark World for me, half the game, basically feels like one big Magmoor Caverns run. It does have a few standout moments and some cool puzzles, and it's totally rad to expand a bubble with the light beam and watch all the Ing that get caught inside get blown to bits. But there are definitely a lot of times where you're just running to the next portal, ignoring all enemies because they take way too long to kill and will only cost resources and time that you'd be better off spending elsewhere. The Dark World areas don't really stand out much from their Light World counterparts, and if anything, they're just slightly annoying to navigate around. There's not really much more I can say here beyond the fact that I simply don't like these areas, and I find them tedious, but I don't think I'm even nearly alone on that hill. Honestly, booting up Prime 3 and seeing Norian just put the biggest smile on my face after 20 hours of this shit. So, we've seen how the game makes some clear improvements, and we've seen how it has clear drawbacks of its own. This makes it come very much down to opinion when determining if it's better or worse than the first. It's a subjective matter. But, if I have to add just one more jab in favor of my argument that Prime 2 was a weak sequel, I have to mention a major issue with the first game that they absolutely needed to fix, totally could have fixed, was well known at the time, but for some inexplicable reason, they didn't. Beyond all other issues, one of Metroid Prime's biggest blunders was the way it handled this fetch quest at the end. After clearing the game and getting all the upgrades, players can't proceed to the final boss until they've collected all 12 Chozo artifacts. There are vague clues as to where they are, but it's safe to say they're the most well-hidden collectibles in the game, and the player isn't likely to have stumbled upon more than maybe 4 or 5 of those puppies during their playthrough. This forces the player to go back and spend a serious period of time meandering through the entire world collecting these things. This padding BS kills the game's pacing going into the end, and it was widely criticized even when the game was first launched. There was always a clear solution to this. Keep the artifacts in the game, keep them hidden in the exact same spots, keep the clues, but make them optional. Players who like sniffing through the world solving riddles and finding the artifacts can do so, while those who don't can go ahead and beat the game as soon as they get the Phazon suit from the mines. Not only would this give players a choice, but it would also make finding the artifacts more rewarding for those who choose to do so, because they know that they're taking it upon themselves to seek them out. The reward for finding all of the artifacts should have been to take your power beam and transform it into a big fucking gun. A game that did this perfectly before Echoes came out was Majora's Mask. You can beat the game with only a small fraction of the collectible masks, but players who went out of their way to find every last one of them can trade them all in for the Fierce Deities mask, which turns a challenging final boss fight into a complete joke. This is a cool idea because it rewards diligent players for the time they invested in the game. So, given the fact that this ending was so criticized even back in 2002, and given the fact that Wind Waker was also heavily criticized for doing the exact same shit the following year, and that clear solutions exist and have been well implemented by Nintendo before, what did Echoes do? Did they avoid doing this again? Did they respond to the feedback? No. They doubled down. Rather than fix this, Prime 2 went the other way and fully committed to another big and mandatory endgame fetch quest. They made it significantly more confusing, tedious, and longer, showing that they blatantly didn't learn the biggest lesson they needed to take away from criticism. Like the artifacts, there are now 8 Dark World keys needed to open a final gate at the end, but each key can only be found by first finding the dead body of the Luminoth warrior who hid it. If you're the sort of player who doesn't scan every little thing, then you're punished heavily for it, since not scanning one of these dead bodies means you're going to be missing a vital clue to find the corresponding key. Using the shrine clues to find the bodies, then parsing through your pause menu to use the body clues to find the actual keys is complex. It is kind of cool to see the last words of these Luminoth warriors who died fighting, but aside from that, this is just ridiculous. This can honestly take hours, and it is blatantly, without any room for any argument whatsoever, way worse than the fetch quest in the first game. Kinda weird. Obviously, the question of whether Metroid Prime 2 was better than the first game comes down to preference. Players in particular who are looking for a challenge in tough, engaging boss fights might find more to like here. But for me, it's not even close. Till this day, even coming back years later, I simply have more fun with Prime 1. The world is much more engaging to explore, the upgrades are more exciting to find, and even the lore is more interesting, not to mention the jaw-dropping atmosphere. The sequel simply didn't innovate enough on top of that foundation. It did fix some issues that Metroid Prime had, but it also introduced new problems and failed to address others. For every step Echoes took forward, it took 2 back. Now, let's be clear. All 3 of these games deserve to be framed in the Louvre. There's not a single bad Metroid Prime game. But they shouldn't do it like this.
It should be more like this. Yes.
Metroid Prime Echoes has always been the underdog, and it's great to see people coming back to this game and appreciating it the way it deserves to be appreciated, and loving it the way any Metroid game deserves to be loved. But saying that this is better than the first game, or that it's a perfect or ideal sequel, is a stretch. I see it as more of an experimental sequel to a great game that didn't quite stick the landing. Anyways, thank you all for watching and have a good night. Or day. Oh, and here's to hoping Metroid Prime 4 doesn't bring back this beam ammo crap. Cheers.
Damn it.
Did you know that without trans women, women don't exist? Which is a remarkable statement from this very well-informed lady. Let's have a listen to her argument and analyze it as we go through.
Womanhood does not exist without trans women. I'll say that again. Womanhood does not exist without trans women.
Okay. If womanhood is not a thing, do women precede trans women, or do trans women precede women? It must be that women came first and trans women came afterwards. Because otherwise, why wouldn't we just call trans women women or something else? Why would we use the word woman that was then later appropriated to the female gender? Why would that be the case? It must be that woman as a descriptor for the female gender preceded transness, right? So actually it's the other way around. Trans woman wouldn't exist if woman doesn't exist. And it is piggybacking as a concept on the concept of woman. So that is just factually, logically how it must have been. Please continue your argument.
Without trans women, womanhood is not a choice.
Womanhood isn't a choice. You don't have a choice. Me being a man is not really a choice. You being a woman is not a choice. When you become an adult human female, you are what we call a woman. When I become an adult human male, I am what we call a man. This is not a choice. And the funny thing about this is that this person identifies, later on in the videos you'll see, as a cis woman. So, oh, I'm a cis woman, but I choose to be a cis woman. How do you know? How do you know you chose to be a cis woman? Surely to prove that you're choosing the thing that you think that you are, you have to actually make sure you're not just choosing the thing that biologically and the patriarchy is expecting you to be, right? Otherwise, you don't really know it's a choice. But also, I don't think people do get to choose. I think you are just an adult human female or an adult human male, and anything else is you playing pretend, really, right? You're saying to the rest of the world, look, I would like it if you would pretend with me. And like I said, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I'm not even like that hard on it, depending on how nice the person is, basically. But this kind of attitude, where you think you're logical and you're not, the logic you're using is actually completely back to front, with the very hardline attitude on it, makes me just want to be hardline as well and say, no, absolutely not. Everything you're saying is wrong, and I'm going to come down hard on the patriarchal side. Sorry.
Gender becomes a fucking prison.
Gender is just what it is. Like, again, you're pretending as if you can just do other things, but nobody actually treats these people like women. Nobody actually treats transgender women to men as men, right? I'm not gonna, if Elliot Page pisses me off, right, if a man sufficiently pissed me off, I would offer them outside and we would have a fight, right? That's not going to happen with Elliot Page, right? That's not going to happen. I don't think that the same rules apply, and so it is still, in this way, a prison, psychologically, subconsciously, whether you like it or not. All of the pretense on the front end of gender, like that you want to play around with, okay, but I don't have to agree to it. And when the reality comes calling, your transgender women are not going to need cervical smears. They will need prostate exams, though. Just saying.
Okay, a cage constructed of oppressive binaries, designed by white supremacy and built by the patriarchy.
Right. Gender was never designed. Right? Gender is gender, and it is valid to draw a distinction between sex and gender, but that doesn't mean they're independent of one another. Genders are built on sexes. So the gender role for male, which we all know, you've got to be relatively tough, open doors for women. We've got our own cultural things. If you're in Islamic countries, maybe it has an aspect of violence towards women. If you're a woman, maybe you have to walk behind your man, etc., etc. Gender, as a social performance, is different to sex, but it is, like I said, built on top of it and deeply connected to it. No matter what Judith Butler says, they are not separate and floating entities with ne'er the twain shall meet. So that's nonsense. Secondly, this social institution that is the gender roles that we have in society was, again, not constructed. It was inherited after a long series of millions and millions and millions of different small negotiations on how we would, as men and women, like to live together. No one constructed it. The patriarchy, God willing, didn't do this. This was the natural response and result of men and women just living together, which is why every culture has these gender roles. Like almost every culture. And then when you see like a weird anomaly, the exception proves the rule. These things are not like chosen. Again, we inherit them because you need them. You need protection from men. Okay, that's what this comes down to. And that's all the patriarchy has ever wanted for you. To protect you from the excesses of men. Because I'm telling you, like opening the door to certain men and giving them an out, like in Britain today, yesterday, there was a headline, rapists will no longer be able to identify as female when they go to prison. So isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? The patriarchy is protecting female prisoners from male rapists who want to identify as transgender to get into the female prison to carry on raping. Google Karen White if you want an example of this.
And facilitated by cis white women. And trans women had previously busted down the doors to those fucking cages and...
Sorry, facilitated by cis white women. That nearly slipped me by there. As if only cis white women are interested in female-only spaces away from men. Do you think women in India are like, yeah, no, we need a space away from the men? Do you think women in Arabia? Do you think women in China or in South America or in Africa? Like, yeah, no, we bring all the men into our spaces. It's totally fine. No, these women need spaces away from men. In fact, probably more than European women need spaces away from men, frankly. But this isn't I love the way that you think. It's just like, what are you talking about? It's just women, love.
And trans women had previously busted down the doors to those fucking cages and released us to a world of autonomy.
I love the way, yeah, trans women, otherwise known as males, released us, right? Women, again, not autonomous, can't do it for themselves, apparently. What happened to empowerment? What happened to female empowerment? What happened to feminism? Chicks doing it for themselves, all that sort of stuff. No, males had to come in and save you from the gender binary. The thing is, that hasn't happened, has it? It's just nonsense. It's a total fiction in your head. That's not the case, and no one believes it. Which is why currently in Britain, they're literally legally ruling against it. This is a fiction you've been playing out. And eventually, the damage that the fiction has done has got so great that even the woke Supreme Court has had to say, yeah, this isn't how things are going to be.
And opportunity and choice.
You don't have opportunity and choice to be men. I'm sorry, but nobody thinks that women pretending to be men are men. And you can look at any example, like how many women, female to male transitions have there been that have won an Olympic gold medal in any medal in men's sporting competitions? Nobody thinks you can't just become men, and we can't just become women. Again, this has been a social fiction. In reality, it doesn't hold up. Again, biologically, it's just a fact that we are different, and it's not good, and it's not bad, and it's not a prison, it's just reality. That you are saying that reality is imprisoning you. And we wanted the choice not to be women, even though I, as a woman, chose to be a woman, which is really weird. Why would you choose to be a woman if you have male privilege on offer? Why would you choose to be oppressed if the option is ahead of you? And I think it's just because the option isn't ahead of you. You don't have that choice. You don't have the choice to embrace male privilege. And when a woman pretends to be a man sufficiently well, like Nora Vincent did, she's like, oh, being a man is lonely. Being a man is hard. Being a man is depressing. And she ended up killing herself because she got depressed over it. So just saying, I think you can enjoy your female privilege and you're welcome.
And there is no limit to the amount of rights and privileges that trans women have fought for and afforded us.
Right, that's a massive problem, isn't it? No limit to the number of rights and privileges. I don't want you to have infinite rights and infinite privileges. I actually think there definitely should be a limit to anything that you're given, right? There's no limit to rights and privileges. That is a mad statement. Like, no, you should definitely have limits. Know your limits, women. That's Harry Enfield. Like, no. I mean, I don't see how you think that trans women have done this. But yeah, no, definitely everyone should have limits. Everyone should have an enunciated set of rights, and that should be it. Like, boom, done, we've got the rights. Now, get on with your lives. And she's like, no, we need infinite rights and infinite privileges. It's like, no. I mean, you have, like, from my perspective, an unbelievable amount of privilege, but that's because you're a straight, cis, like, woman. And I'm not, so I can see when someone has more privileges than me.
Furthermore, nobody respects, values, understands, or embodies womanhood more than trans women.
That's so good. That's right, ladies. What would you know about womanhood? Look at this man who's dressed as a woman. Look at this person who's literally male, who started being a woman at the age of 27. Don't they know way more about being a woman than you? Don't they embody it better than you do? And the answer is, of course, no. The best they can do is essentially become a pantomime woman. Like, dress up as a woman, wear the trappings of womanhood, but they can never essentially embody womanhood because they are, of course, biologically male. And again, I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I don't want to be mean about this, but it's just facts. It's just the fact of the matter that obviously biological women embody womanhood better. And it's because womanhood is fundamentally predicated on the ability, drum roll please, to give birth. It is predicated on the ability to bear children, gestate children, bear children, and then help raise children. I mean, it's just so preposterous, the idea that men dressing up as women can somehow embody womanhood better than women. It's nonsense. Total, obvious nonsense. And it's the same the other way. Like, the embodiment of masculinity is frankly violence, right? And men obviously do that, they embody that far better than women do. And I'm not just saying random, uncontrolled violence or anything, but that is the essential characteristic of a man. Whereas the essential characteristic of a woman is the ability to give birth. And therefore, basically, women, trans women, can never actually properly embody womanhood. Because, of course, they can never be mothers.
Because how else do you explain relinquishing that proximity to power, the perceived male privilege, in pursuit of womanhood?
I'm going to do the Adam Conover finger. Well, maybe. It's not actually as much of a privilege as you think. And actually, these men, again, think about this. Maybe they're moving towards the power and not away from it. Maybe they are moving into what they think is a role that comes with actually a lot more social privileges than being male does. So I tell you what, I actually don't really think that me being a man has got me very much. I think me being a hardworking and in some aspects talented person has got me to where I am. I don't think me just being a man has helped, because I know loads of men who would like to be where I am but are not where they're at. And so surely there has to be something other than being a man that's put me in this position, not them, right? And, you know, when you compare me to, like, Joe Rogan, like, Joe Rogan has talents I don't have, and therefore he has things that I don't have. None of that came from us simply being men. But again, like, I love the idea that you think womanhood isn't a position. I mean, you've just said they've got unlimited rights and privileges, which I agree with. Basically, they won't give it to you by trans women. But I love the fact that you're like, yeah, these people have got unlimited rights and privileges, which is why they gave up the power of being men to become women. Because actually the power of being a man is not very great, intrinsic, qua being a man, intrinsically to being a man. But there is a great deal more power intrinsic in being a woman, which is to compel the opinions of men. The opinions of men are formed by and are to help women. Men will rally resources and power that they possess to help women. So trans women, when men moving into becoming women, I don't think they're moving away from the cockpit of power here, actually. I think they might be moving towards it. I think the reason you don't see that is what we could call female privilege, which you've just said is unlimited.
In pursuit of womanhood, knowing the subjugation and the victimization and the adversity you will face.
You just told us that women were free. Women liberated by trans people to give unlimited rights and privileges. But I'm sorry, I don't see you as being subjugated at all. I don't think anyone else does. I mean, all the laws are on your side and against the men. Try going through a divorce court, right? Like, it's such a preposterous rendering of the way the world is. And it's the sort of person who's literally just constantly on Blue Sky, I imagine, or on TikTok.
For that choice to be you. And on the contrary, it is cis white women, my fucking peers, shoving us back in that fucking cage and closing and locking the door.
I love the way that she was just saying, look, it's, you know, imagine the oppression these trans women face. And it's like, yeah, okay, I mean, let's just assume from your perspective they are doing that. Why is it now about cis white women? Like, you say, oh, but you've locked us, the cis white women have locked us back in the cage of gender. It's like, yeah, but it's not really about you. I thought you had unlimited privileges. Isn't it about these people who you're trying to defend? But even in doing that, you're like, yeah, so it's all about me, the women. Because again, like, the focus is just always women. And you know what? That's totally fine. As a patriarchal man, that is totally fine. That's the point. But let's not pretend that it's not. Let's not pretend the opposite.
But not before they secure a spot beside us first. So allies need to get so fucking for real right now and realize that there is no world without trans women. There is no womanhood without trans women.
Nonsense,
and we need to start
nonsense,
fucking
nonsense.
acting like it.
Yeah, you need to start acting like it. That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Like, so this is how just phenomenally delusional these people are. It's one thing playing like pretending that this thing is the case, and like I said, I'm happy to indulge it to a certain degree. I'm not hardline on it like Ben Shapiro's hardline on it. I don't see the point, depending on the person and how nice they are and things like that. But when it comes to this kind of perspective, where it's just like, right, okay, they actually invented everything. They invented womanhood. The world is over. That, oh, shut up. That's just ridiculous. You sound like a clown.
This is for Oski, I guess. Here you go. I wanna roll with you, my heart ready will be a little gambling is fine when you're with me. Which one is your favorite though? The one on the left or the right? I wanna roll with you, my heart ready will be a little gambling is fine when you're with me. Left for you. I can't really see him too well. I'd go with the right personally, but to each their own. All right, there we go. The lady. Ooh. The lover. Nice, bro. Yeah, I feel like this is probably the best one for my playstyle. The stat boost is... Oh wait, what the fuck? Oh, you have to do X. Yes.
The signs I read show the end of my path. My death.
Careers freedom with the 2. Play as a hermaphrodite. Ricky comes.
Your
Yeah.
stars are not mine. Today the warrior shall prove a stalwart companion when fortune fades.
Well, dude, it's where astrology belongs in a work of fiction.
My dreams grant me no opinions of success. Their compass ventures not beyond the doors of death, but in your face I behold.
Yeah, women that unironically believe in astrology are a massive red flag. Get out while you can.
And with the promise of your aid, my heart must be satisfied. No trophies of my triumphs precede me, but I have lived well, and my ghost shall rest easy. Men are but flesh and blood. They know their doom, but not the hour. In this, I am blessed to see the hour of my death, to face my apportioned fate.
Yeah, the face does look really off. I don't know. It looks really uncanny. It looks like one of those, like, low-budget kind of Indian animations you see on YouTube. But Rent-A-Dog with the 5 wasn't here the last 2 days. The Last of Us 2 scene was awful in many ways. 2 copyright from IGN comparison video. Yeah, we pulled it up, I think, like the brief, like 6-second one, but yeah, it's terrible, bro. Absolutely terrible.
I go to my grave, a tongue shriller than all the music calls me. You shall follow me yet for a while, then we must part.
Yeah, it does look like AI, that's the thing.
Here, carry this torch and stick close.
Oh, shoot.
All right, awesome. Thanks, nigga. All right.
We're the Emperor's bodyguards. Our job is to get him out of situations like this. Although I admit, things are not going according to plan. My job is to make... Stick close and let us do our job. You'll be all right.
You handled yourself pretty well back there.
He's a member of the Dark Brotherhood, that's why.
Protect the Emperor!
Come with us.
Hold up. I don't like this. Let me take a look.
Uh-oh, my legs are clipping through the cloth. Whoops. Damn, bro, my calves are just so fucking shredded. They're tearing right through the fabric.
It's a dead end. What's your call?
They're behind us. Wait here, sire. For the Emperor!
Take them down!
The dragon fire! Die!
Leroy, over here!
My blood! I told you to stop. Am I supposed to be impressed? You're pathetic. Die! What's the matter?
Not for the blades! Get back with the Emperor. Protect him with your life. Take them down.
Show me what you got.
Die, you scum! Take them down. You thought we'd go down easy? If you want to help, get back and protect the Emperor.
I can go no further. You alone must stand against the Prince. Take the amulet. Give it to Joffrey. He alone knows. Find him.
chose a bad day to take up.
Wowie zowie, dude, he died.
The Emperor, now he and all his heirs are dead. The amulet. Where's the amulet of kings? It wasn't on the Emperor's body. Strange. They say it's the dragon blood that flows through the veins of every scepter. They see more than less of it. The amulet of kings is a sacred symbol of the Empire. Most people think of the red dragon crown, but that's just jewelry. The amulet has power. Only a true heir of the blood can wear it, they say. He must have given it to you for a reason. Did he say why? Joffrey? He said that? Why? Nothing I ever heard about. But Joffrey would be the one to know. He's the Grand Master of my order. Although you may not think so to meet him, he lives quietly as a monk at Weymouth. First, you need to get out of here. Through that door, it's a secret way out of the Imperial Air. You'll need this. There are ranks.
Let's see. Colin with the tier 1 membership. Appreciate it. There he goes.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.
Probably that. Yeah, probably Crusader. Have I seen the soul people crying over Switch 2 using DLSS in games that even Digital Foundry didn't notice it already used DLSS? NVIDIA AI upscaler is just amazing. Yeah, they're used to probably they're probably used to whatever the fuck it's called, FSR. So.
Really?
But yeah, NVIDIA technology inside of a console is pretty pretty cool.
Rats and goblins. You must. Good. I'll stay here to guard the Emperor. By the.
You'll stay here to guard the Emperor. Nah, I want the Imperial drip. The Glenroy guy only has 2 gold on him. He's poor. Oops. Why did it unclear this one? Oh, did it break? Yep, pre-orders start tomorrow night, so. Yeah, I'm just spamming my restoration magic to level it up. Wowie zowie, dude. We made it. Hooray. How are the trophies in this game? Probably pretty easy. Looks like. Yeah, see, this is the part I'm not wild about. Like, look how bland this looks. Like, it looks like somebody took a shit in the rivers. Like, I don't know. And then where's, like, the white hue of the, you know, architect? I don't know. This is the part I don't like. Is everything looks brown and dirty and just Unreal Engine looking. And then the foliage is so much less dense, too. There's like hardly any foliage at all in the background. Well, not on console, they won't fix it.
Yeah.
I'll skip the noon, but it's not really doing anything.
Come right
It
to
still
me.
doesn't have that hue. Still
Yeah.
looks like rocks instead of white marble.
I'm coming.
I can't find the picture. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it just looks really bland. Like all the old stones in the original game had like this white, you know, glow to them. This just looks like more rocks. Like, look, the rocks here are the same color pretty much as that. And it's just kind of like, eh.
Jump on my sword while you can.
What's wrong with an Elder Scrolls game on console? That's probably how most people played them. That's how I've played every single one I've played. Yeah, I don't mod, so it means nothing to me. Yeah, I really wish they would have preserved the original art style. That would have been nice. But so far, it's fine. I'm glad they didn't change the gameplay, so the leaks on that were not right. Or they just claimed that they changed it and it didn't really change.
Look who we've got here.
Ooh. What? Oh. It's like, why does it want me to sleep? Yeah, I never played Skyrim on the Switch. I bought it, but I've never actually played it. It's valuable, but I don't know. Will that weigh me down too much? How is this an anti-woke boycott? I haven't seen anyone say it's woke. I mean, other than like the body type AB shit, but it's Microsoft in 2025. So, yeah, you should expect that at this point.
What's that?
showing your face was the last mistake.
Die, slut.
All right, awesome. Thanks, nigga. All right.
Not a zombie, dude. Oh. I'm a wizard, a grand wizard, man. It's my mission in life to take down the Dark Brotherhood.
I think Tatum sent you like a graduation invite.
The fuck? There we go. I already came through here. Shit. Oh, shit.
I can't afford this shit!
I really don't fucking get this shit, but whatever. Whatever. Just quick save. Yeah, I really don't like the lock picking system compared to Skyrim for that exact reason, because it's just RNG. See if there's actually anything worth a damn in here.
Did you know
Early in Metroid Prime's development, the three main villains were a mind-reading South African, a Luddite cult leader, and a neo-Nazi eugenicist. If you've ever looked into Metroid Prime's development, you might have heard it grew out of an earlier project called Action Adventure. To get the inside scoop, we spoke with 7 Metroid Prime team members for this video, including the original lead developer John Whitmore, who told us the action-adventure game was actually called Metaforce. Metaforce starred 3 hot metahumans who Retro decided to make female, because in the late 90s, the mindset was that if a game was third person, players would rather stare at 3 hot chicks from behind than 3 dudes. The neo-Nazi eugenicist wanted to steal their DNA and use it to make a beautiful master race. And this bizarre female-led adventure was the egg that Metroid Prime hatched from, thanks in no small part to Shigeru Miyamoto. In 1999, John and his team at Retro Studios created over 1,000 pages of design documents detailing a futuristic society where gene editing created a utopia, but dark forces were using the technology for evil. It was up to the 3 female protagonists to stop them and save the world, and this trio were called the Metaforce, each with a different playstyle. Bryn was a cybernetic girl who specialized in firearms, Miko was a ninja with psychic abilities, and the third woman was a rifle-wielding assassin. The game would have been around 30 hours in length across 3 acts, each with their own primary antagonist. The first act centered around a Luddite cult leader in India. This cult created a race of 4-armed mutants that carried 4 guns at a time and served as the cult's foot soldiers. The Luddite cult were actually terrorists, running around sabotaging everything they could, including a Jurassic Park-style zoo. Here's John describing a section of Chapter 1.
We re-engineered mammoths, they were basically carrying this re-engineered mammoth to the zoo in an armored car or whatever, and he blows up the caravan and lets the mammoth loose, and the mammoth is rampaging through the city destroying stuff, and you've got to deal with the bad guys, but then also the mammoth that's running around destroying things too. That was a really cool mission.
Chapter 2 focused on the aforementioned neo-Nazi eugenicist who wanted to steal the Metaforce's genes, and as for the villain of the third and final act, John told us,
he was a mind-controlling South African. And he was kind of behind the whole thing. So he had been funding the terrorists and basically getting the neo-Nazis to stir up trouble so he could do things elsewhere. It was, like I said, a really neat plot. I really liked.
Nintendo was part owner of Retro and loved the direction the game was taking, but thought maybe 3 playable characters was too ambitious, so John's team whittled it down to just 1. Bryn, the gun-wielding cybernetic chick. Nintendo also thought third-person cameras were pretty tricky to implement back in those days, so they told Retro to switch the game to first-person. After those changes were implemented was when Miyamoto got involved, who also liked the game's direction, but thought Bryn was too generic, and asked them to come up with a cooler main character. So Retro swapped her out with an alien with sonic abilities that let her see enemies through walls, and wrote another 1,000 pages of design documents. The protagonist alien was discovered by the US government in a UFO crash, then turned into a federal agent to help them fight off an invasion by another race of aliens, who were evil. Eventually, Miyamoto said something along the lines of, "You know what? These enemy aliens would make great space pirates. How would y'all like to turn this into a Metroid game?" John's team thought that sounded great, so they played through all the Metroid games over and over, watched hours of speedruns, read every forum post they could find, and wrote another 1,000 pages of design documents. By then, it had become a running joke at Retro that once a game hit 1,000 pages, it was definitely gonna get cancelled. At this point, Retro had no idea what the GameCube was going to look like or what kind of hardware was under the hood. They were initially told it would be a lot more powerful, and Nintendo showed them some GameCube prototypes, one of which looked like a transparent PlayStation 2. They also said it would essentially have a PS2 DualShock controller, so Retro planned for Metroid Prime to have traditional FPS controls where the right stick handles movement and the left stick adjusts the view. Retro thought it all sounded awesome, but one day Nintendo showed up with the finalized hardware, a purple lunchbox and a controller that John told us looked like it could only be used for Miyamoto games.
Look, the GameCube, it's not even a cube, so that's a problem for me just with my OCD. Like, if you're gonna call something a cube, make it a cube at least, but I don't like my Play School version, my first video game Play School console. look that it had. Wasn't a big fan.
Here's James H. Dargy, who also worked on Metaforce and stayed on board till Metroid Prime shipped. Already exhausted from all his team's work that had thus far gotten thrown in the trash, the weaker and kiddier GameCube was the last straw for John. He pretty much immediately quit and found a new job elsewhere. And when Metroid Prime launched a year later, they left him out of the credits. That's the short version of the story, but there were a few more twists and turns, like switching back to third person, then back again to first person. But now you know how the gene-stealing third-person adventure with 3 female leads gradually evolved into a first-person game starring a single heroine fighting against aliens. So let's check out some of the game's other history. Before coming to Retro, James H. Dargy also worked on ships featured in The Matrix and Final Fantasy Spirits Within, so Nintendo told him for Samus's ship, he could quote, do anything. He went through a number of iterations, but what he ended up with was the ship we know today, a vessel with lots of sci-fi inspirations, but mostly the ship from Super Metroid and Star Wars' Millennium Falcon. He showed us his model of Samus's ship, and told us as an homage to the Millennium Falcon, he added these guns to the bottom, which you never actually see in-game, but they are there. Even if you don't get to see the guns firing, you can still see the panels that conceal them. Samus's ship in Metroid Prime isn't the same ship from the mainline series. It was designed and modeled entirely by James. Fans usually refer to all Samus's ships collectively as the gunship, even though none of them actually have names. But James told us he named the ship in Metroid Prime the Thrush Eterna, inspired by a fast-flying bird called a thrush. According to James, Samus's ship never really had a name. I've designed a few different spaceships, and I've written lore and backstory for different games, and even for film. You know, I'm a big fan of sci-fi in general, so I think cool ships should have cool names, and that's the name I came up with. It was kind of bird-like, and I wanted it to be cool, like eternal. Maybe it existed long before Samus ever got it. The name Thrush Eterna implies backstory. He went on to say that files at the top-level directory were called Thrush Eterna, but the ship's name never actually appears in the game's script.
Maybe it was more mysterious to leave it the ship with no name, you know. Maybe.
We also spoke with Metroid Prime's audio lead, Clark Wen, who filled us in on the audio history and sound secrets.
Yeah, there's one Easter egg I think the fans might be curious to know about, because I've never told anyone, and you have to be a bit of a film fan to understand it.
The Easter egg he's talking about can be found in the Save Room fanfare. There's a tone you'll hear right after saving or when you load your save file. Clark told us this audio Easter egg comes from the 1971 film Walkabout, which he was obsessed with and watched over and over during Prime's development. To quickly summarize without giving away any spoilers, the movie's about a father who drives his 2 children into the Australian wilderness, then has a mental breakdown and sets the car on fire, then shoots himself. So his 2 kids are left with no choice but to wander the outback trying to find their way to civilization. The movie has heavy themes of survival and isolation, along with some otherworldly soundscapes, all of which Clark wanted to emulate in Metroid Prime. The entire game has an audio vibe inspired by the film, but the Save Room fanfare is a direct reference to the scene in Walkabout where the kids survive their first nightfall, drenched in one of the film's soundscapes. Here it is. That's the Easter egg in Prime's Save Room fanfare. Did you catch it? Here's them side by side for comparison. It's a pretty pessimistic film, but Clark shared some more lighthearted sound stories as well. Like the sounds puddle spores make are actually Metroid Prime's developers burping and belching. He told us, the sounds of the puddle spore creatures that appear in the Magmoor Caverns area were made using the thickest, wettest burps I could wrangle from my fellow Retro employees. I sent a company-wide email asking for volunteers who could belch on cue. Afterwards, to my surprise, I literally had a line of people waiting outside the VO booth. That was a fun day of recording. He ended up using 4 of those belches in the final game, after using some distortions, of course. According to Clark, Metroid Prime's space pirates actually speak a real human language. Well, Kind of. He told us, I wanted the pirates to sound kind of semi-intelligent. Instead of using animal sounds and roars, I wanted them to have some kind of language. So I took Russian words and kind of flipped around the syllables and assigned them to different actions. So for example, when they attack the player, that was using the Russian word for attack, then just moving some of the syllables around. I got someone in the studio to record them, then we put them in the game. But it sounded like we had Russian mafia yelling something in Slavic. Clark wasn't satisfied with the Russian mafia vibe, so he scrapped the audio and replaced it with pit bull noises. But in playtesting, the staff thought it sounded cartoony and dumb, so he threw that out as well. Clark's third attempt is what made it into the final game. One of Retro's programmers was Nigerian and spoke a language called Yoruba, so just like earlier with Russian, Clark had him take the Yoruba words like attack and mixed up the syllables, recorded his voice, and distorted it. And that's the language the space pirates speak in the final game. Clark also wanted to use his own voice for the Tangleweeds. He was running short on time, so rather than trying to find a proper sound effect, he just made the sound with his own mouth. He told us, those sounds are actually my voice pitch shifted up an octave, and the only time I used my voice anywhere in Prime. After some head-scratching remarks from Nintendo over the years, there's been confusion among fans whether or not the Prime series is part of mainline canon, or if it's part of its own separate canon. According to series producer Yoshio Sakamoto, he thought about making Prime separate, what he calls a Gaiden, but ultimately decided it was best to insert it into the mainline canon between Metroid 1 and 2. When we talked to John Whitmore, he said his team actually did think they were making a Gaiden. He told us, we were considering it as just kind of a reboot of Metroid, without much historical reference to the past games. Or at least I think it was basically, Nintendo will kind of figure this out for us after the fact. We wanted to use enemies from the previous games, so there was some sense that this was building on what happened in previous games. But like I said, we were looking at it as more of a reboot, rather than as something connected to a history of the franchise. So even though Metroid Prime was developed as a reboot, or Gaiden, Nintendo ultimately decided to insert it into the timeline after Metroid 1. The titular Metroids were one of the returning enemies Retro wanted to appear in the game, so really it was the only place Nintendo could insert Prime into the timeline, since Samus drove Metroids to extinction in Metroid 2. Well, except the baby, of course. John also told us Metroid Fusion wasn't originally part of Nintendo's master plan. He said it was common knowledge that Miyamoto was willing to take the risk with Retro, who'd never even completed a single game before, making a new Metroid because it wasn't a franchise Miyamoto created himself. And to quote John directly, Miyamoto didn't care if we killed it. Previous Metroid games sold pretty poorly, especially in Japan, but Prime took the world by storm when it was revealed at Space World 2000. John says Nintendo was really surprised when those early trailers generated massive hype, especially in the West, and it was the hype for Prime that directly led Nintendo starting development on Fusion, a companion game for Game Boy Advance that launched the exact same day as Metroid Prime. John told us, I don't think Nintendo had any idea how big Metroid was gonna be. Like I said, it wasn't Miyamoto's favorite game, and it was kinda dormant among Nintendo franchises for a while. It wasn't until the news came out that they were doing Metroid Prime and people really started talking about it that they said, actually, this is a franchise we overlooked, and realized how much legs it had here in the West. And that's when they decided to do the GBA Metroid game as well. But when we were first working on Metroid Prime, they had no plans for doing anything like that. It was the buzz that was continually being generated about Metroid that got them to inject something else into the franchise. But even if Miyamoto was willing to risk Metroid's death at the hands of an unproven studio, he still brought his A game and was instrumental in the game's success. Retro spent the first 3 months developing Metroid Prime as a third-person adventure, but Miyamoto upended the T-table and made them change it to first-person. Some areas had to be changed or thrown out entirely, like this vertical platforming section that simply wouldn't work in first-person. Even Sakamoto and Retro's president Jeff Spangenberg wanted 3D Metroid to be in third person, and the battle over perspectives was one of the main reasons John Whitmore resigned as head of the project. And John says although Miyamoto won the war, the guys at Retro still snuck in as many chances to switch to third person as they could to show off the Samus model they designed, like in save rooms and cutscenes. But looking back on it all now, 2 decades later, John admits Miyamoto was absolutely right to make the game in first person. person. Very late in development, Miyamoto also remapped the game's buttons himself, which made controlling Samus a lot more intuitive, and as a result, made the game a whole lot better. James told us, Miyamoto changed the idea of how it should function, like this button being lock on and this button turning the camera and how it works. We had it just a little different, but it never quite felt natural.
Like you got used to it and it was like, oh yeah, like once you understand it, it's functional, but you know, he had suggested a different approach and it was much more intuitive, and that was only after like 15 minutes of playing with it. You know, he knows he's good at his job. I guess he's a good, he's one of those real geniuses.
We also got in touch with Jim Warnell, the Nintendo of America artist who made Metroid Prime's logo. He told us the logo went through 53 iterations, which based on all the man-hours that went into it, made it the most expensive logo Nintendo ever produced. Different colors, different fonts, different designs, and after 53 different versions, this is what he ended up with. Everyone loved it, so Jim was later tasked with making the logos for Metroid Fusion, Prime 2, and Metroid Prime Hunters. Speaking of which, all these games had completely different box art in Japan, but still used Jim's logo designs. He didn't do the logos for Prime 3 or Zero Mission though, which is why their designs are noticeably different. They're basically just stylized text. Speaking of Metroid Prime 3, did you know it was almost an open world game where Samus was an actual bounty hunter? As in, she would have gone on side quests hunting down baddies and hauling them in for a reward. We spoke with Brian Walker, the senior producer of Prime 2 and 3, and also the guy who convinced Nintendo to let them remaster the entire trilogy and release it for the price of only one Wii game. He left Retro Studios a few years ago after finishing the trilogy, and from his home in the countryside of Austin, Texas, he told us one big development story. After wrapping up development on Prime 2, Brian and his team were feeling a little burnt out on the franchise, so they looked through Nintendo's collection of IP to consider what they wanted to work on next. They created design documents for potential Wii games and pitched them to Nintendo. One of them was a revival of Donkey Kong Country, and another was a Zelda spin-off where you played as the last surviving Sheikah after your race was wiped out in a genocidal ethnic cleansing. Retro's pitches were forwarded to Nintendo President Satoru Iwata, who came back and said before Retro branched out into new IP, he wanted them to make the Prime series a proper trilogy. The Wii hadn't released yet, and Iwata wanted a new Metroid Prime that could show off the capabilities of their new home console and the potential of its revolutionary new controller. So Retro agreed. They'd go bananas with Donkey Kong later, but first, they'd make Metroid Prime 3. So they got to work brainstorming what Samus's jump into the next console generation was gonna look like, and what they came up with was open-world bounty hunting. Brian knows what kinds of ideas might conjure up in the imaginations of modern gamers, and he's seen some over-exuberant fans spreading wild exaggerations of Retro's concept since he briefly mentioned it on the excellent Kiwi Talks podcast. But to get the full and accurate story out to the fanbase, Brian asked us to help set the record straight with this video. He told us, "We were not proposing in any way, shape, or form, even in our wildest dreams, that we would have like Metroid Prime Skyrim. We were not talking about 200-hour side quests or anything like that. More precisely, it was the ability for the player to operate out of a hub area and to go on to different missions that didn't necessarily lend themselves directly to the normal path progression that a Metroid Prime game was known for, as far as traversal, retroversal, and so forth. Samus had the ability to step outside of that and do more things on the side. Brian and a lot of the other guys at Retro Studios had always imagined Samus as someone like Boba Fett, but with a sense of honor. For the non-Star Wars fans out there, Boba Fett's an intergalactic bounty hunter with a decades-long career hunting down heads for cash, probably most famous for capturing Han Solo at the behest of Jabba the Hutt. As such, most of the optional side quests in Metroid Prime 3 would have consisted of bounty hunting missions, with Samus leaving the game's main campaign to fly around the galaxy, chasing down baddies of various types. Retro didn't plan on implementing an in-game currency. Instead, Samus's reward would have been gaining additional capabilities. To quote Brian directly, I recall the ability for the player to, for lack of a better term, applying the JRPG term here, to level up by going off to do some side quests instead of following the scripted storyline, so to speak. So that was a key consideration, and that's a well-established convention in a variety of games. And it wasn't just Samus. Her ship would have grown stronger as well. In fact, making the ship more central to gameplay was one of Retro's primary goals for wrapping up the trilogy. The game's director Mark Pacini built a 10-inch origami replica of Samus's ship and brought it into their production meetings, using it as something of a mascot for the game's production. When we asked whatever happened to that origami ship, Brian said he thinks Mark Pacini probably still has it tucked away somewhere.
He should auction that off on eBay after all the exposure it's getting here. We could probably raise some good funds for a charity with it. Hey, no pressure, Mark. Cough it up.
Hopefully that'll happen someday and we'll all get a chance to see it. While discussing how Samus's ship would have worked in-game, Brian was quick to explain that Retro never planned to let players actively fly the ship. He told us, the thing we should clarify is that we're not talking about flying the ship first person like Wing Commander. That wouldn't really have fit in with the Metroid Prime formula. It was just something we felt like if you couldn't do it right, if you couldn't make something state-of-the-art, don't try to do it halfway. So a watered-down Wing Commander approach just wasn't gonna fly, no pun intended. Rather than the player flying the ship directly, it would have served as an extension of Samus's abilities in the overworld. Retro prototyped several abilities, like calling in the ship to serve as a distraction, drawing enemy fire away from Samus so she'd have an easier time clearing them out. But only 2 of these abilities made it into the final game. Ship missiles that would let you call in a bombing run, and the grapple beam for moving large objects, neither of which were used all too frequently. Overall, the ship was just meant to play a larger role and be a more applicable tool in Samus's repertoire as she explored the game world. Brian's immensely proud of how the game turned out, but laments the limited ship functionality in the game's final build, feeling they ended up short of their original goals. So why didn't open world bounty hunting become a reality? Retro took their design docs and pitched the concept to Nintendo in a high-level presentation. They wanted to expand on the Boba Fett aspects of Samus's character, but it turned out Nintendo had a completely different understanding of who and what Samus really is. As Brian remembers it, Kiyo, who was one of the translators, boiled it down very well in the assumption that our Japanese partners had of Samus, that she was not doing it for the money, she was being very altruistic, and I think he rolled out the term motherly. She was caring for people. What she was doing was literally out of the goodness of her heart, because she deeply cared about humanity, which was as far away from Boba Fett as you can get. I never would have equated Samus with the definition of an altruistic motherly influence, given that she had the title of bounty hunter. We were just looking at Kiyo as he was describing this like, are we even on the same planet? Retro was genuinely confused why Nintendo was so resistant to the bounty hunting mission structure they were proposing, until after several days of discussion they realized Nintendo didn't actually know what a bounty hunter really was. They'd been calling Samus a bounty hunter since 1986, but apparently they thought of her more as a space adventurer with a heart of gold. A space adventurer that definitely didn't hunt bounties. And ultimately, that contradiction between Retro and Nintendo's understanding of Samus's character was why the open world concept got killed off. But there were also some practical concerns. Retro Studios was a lean, mean Metroid Prime developing team with only 45 devs. As Brian describes it, they were hardwired and staffed to make that finely crafted and balanced experience of the first 2 Metroid Primes. But to do something much different outside of that would have been a pretty significant staffing and development push. It was outside of the very tightly scripted, very carefully crafted experience of discovery and isolation that really are the fundamentals of the Metroid experience, not only in Prime, but the 2D games as well. Some of us had worked on other types of games that had these kind of sandbox considerations, and we were pointing out the amount of work to do something even close to competent in that area was significant. We trusted Nintendo at the end of the day. We trusted their instincts and their judgment. They're the best in the business for a reason. They have a long track record of making the right call. In the end, they decided to stay the course and develop Prime 3 with a similar formula to the first 2 games, although Brian says he would have loved to see what fans thought of the more open world format. To be clear, that game isn't in a vault somewhere, and outside of the ship's functions, Retro's ideas only existed as documents pitched to Nintendo, and it was one of many rejected pitches Brian's been involved with in his 30-year career. But who knows? With Retro Studios back in the saddle with Metroid Prime 4, maybe someday we'll get to see that vision become a reality.
you go. Go ahead and spam my jump. Dude, I have like paranoia that I'm gonna get to the end of the game again and not be able to fucking finish it, so if you ever see me jump spamming like that, then yeah. This is way better than Avowed. This combat feels better than Avowed. Oops. Ah. Bro, the fall damage did more than the spikes. Oh my god. The fucking fall damage is what killed me. I should have just rode it up. I should have just rode it up and I wouldn't have taken any damage. Shit. It was the fall damage that killed me. Not the actual, like spikes. Watch. If I ride it up, it barely does anything. But if you fall, you take like a shitload of damage, so that's what killed me. I would have been better off to just ride it up and then, you know, eat the fucking spikes. Oblivion logic, dude. Oblivion logic at its finest. That's straight from the Todd Howard School of Game Design. I guess I should keep taking arrows. Oh, I almost fucking did it again. Alright. Oh, fuck. Forgot there was one there, too. I forgot where Todd Howard's NPC is. We should go visit him. Look that up real quick. $6 shekels, one for each million.
Yeah. Okay.
Ooh. Yeah, what you
baby.
use. Just walk past it. Oh, dead end. gas. That's right. I never liked Fallout personally. I never got into it. Should be able to poke. I need destruction magic. Oh, you need silver? Fuck. Alright, let's just walk through. I probably can make it through. I can probably just walk through these. I have a high end, or I'm on a low enough difficulty. So oops. Grab this stuff over here. Is that all there is in here? Shit.
I can't afford this shit!
Surely that can't be everything. Maybe I have to go this way. So I did see the staircase. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that was it. Okay. Alright, well, that was a pretty uneventful place. Tim Arco, the 279 almost looks like a Valve reveal trailer. I think this is, well, I don't really think it's anything crazy to say, but this is way better than a Valve. I mean, Avowed was always a cheap Elder Scrolls copy, but the combat in this still feels better than the shit in Avowed. Avowed's combat was genuinely garbage. My intelligence is being drained. Uh-oh. Shit. There ain't none left to take. Drusy with the 2 ain't no party like a Griffin party. That's right, man. We gotta get the baby oil out as soon as possible. What's so hype about this game? It's just Oblivion. So Oblivion is probably the best Elder Scrolls. So it's just if you like Elder Scrolls, then you'll probably like these. Was that it? I forget how basic a lot of these fucking interiors are. Like, there's not really much to do on a lot of them. See, that just doesn't look natural, does it? That almost looks like I don't know, bro. Like, a lot of the stuff in this is really visually jarring. Like, that does not look like it belongs, right? It almost looks like two different texture sets. Like, this is an asset from a game that was pasted into another game. Yeah, there's just certain things with the visuals in this that really just don't look cohesive. Yeah, I do miss the old aesthetic from Oblivion. It just felt so much more like fantasy. Ah, yes, Griffin Gaming shitty takes at its finest. How is preferring the original art style a shitty take? I mean, maybe if you're a zoomer retard that thinks Unreal Engine is the pinnacle of graphical, like, game design, then sure, but, you know, for most normal fucking people, you know, having a preference in art style is normal. But, you know. Oh shit. I need to find a silver weapon. More of these spooks. Yeah, dude, it's extra spooky.
You're broke! You're fucking poor!
I would play this over Skyrim personally. Oblivion's a better game, but do whatever your heart desires. Alright, well that was one of them. Alright. Exciting shit. Well, Todd didn't remake this one. This was outsourced to a third-party studio. Bethesda didn't touch this. I don't think any Microsoft studio touched this. It was done by like a completely random studio. So I don't think Todd has any say in the matter.
It all feels.
You come to revel in the glory that is the It's a place of celebration. Approach them. We watch and wait.
Boo! fucking whore. I am powerful, dude. Yeah, I love the Daedric quest as well. That was always my favorite part about Skyrim and Oblivion is the Daedric quest lines. Dude, Obsidian would have ruined it. That's the problem. I mean, I'll go out on a limb and say I don't think Obsidian's made a good game, probably. Since what? I don't like New Vegas, so New Vegas onward, I don't think they've made a good game. So that's as far back as I'm familiar with them. Enemies nearby. Ooh. I don't see none. Mud crab. We're not near the water. No, I don't have anything on my HUD, so. Yeah, the frame rate is dropping like fucking crazy right now, though. Oh, I'm on console. So. Why console? Because I don't really want to play on PC. I'll play Lost Soul Aside on console too. My potato rig is not going to be able to run games good anyway, but yeah, it's just easier to play shit on console. Especially when streaming, because you have full control of your computer and you're not like locked into the game. So. Yeah, I mean, my GPU is 2 generations old anyway, so it's probably time to take it out back to the swamp. Put it out of its misery.
All right, awesome. Thanks, nigga. All right.
Dude, why can't you befriend the heckin' pupperines? The fuck? Hit it. There we go. Dude, a 2080 is old as fuck. Definitely should start looking at upgrading.
Just fucking kidding me.
Let me just load. I probably shouldn't have wasted that. Nah, I wouldn't want anyone to be condemned to an old GPU, man, so I'll just use it as target practice. Take it out to the gun range and test out my